We have a great episode for you tonight as we join an author who wrote a book about a high school team right before World War II that had a remarkable finish and a remarkable story. Hank Gola joins us in just a moment to tell us all about it.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And welcome to another edition where we get to talk to an author that has a very interesting gridiron story. I think you're going to enjoy this one as it goes way back in the time machine in football and to an era that I personally love. And I think you do too, because you listen to the show. The author's name is, and he's a journalist too, is Hank Gola. Hank, welcome to the Pig Pen.
Thanks very much, Darren. Happy to be here.
Hank,
Roll around in the mud a little bit.
that's right. We'll roll around the mud in the pig pen a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So, Hank, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what got you into writing books on sports history and especially this football history book?
Well, I started out in newspapers in 1974 and kind of got in at the right time and out at the right time because not much left of the newspaper business. But I
Mm.
started part-time, ended up covering the Cosmos of the North American Soccer League.
Oh,
And
Pele.
then, yeah, Pele, Beckenbauer, Neskins, it was great. It was most fun I ever had covering anything. And then, well, the NASL kind of met its demise, and I shifted over to football covering the Giants. Did that as a beat for a number of years, got them through two Super Bowls. And for the New York, ended up at the New York Post and then the New York Daily News, uh, where I covered the Giants and then more league stuff rather than just the team. And also golf. I covered the PGA Tour with the Rise of Tiger. So
Wow,
that's
you
pretty
have
much it in a nutshell.
yeah, you have really seen some amazing things both for the teams that you were the writer for and seen some great golf and Rise of Tiger. That's an exciting time in history as well. So yeah, we
Yeah.
definitely have the right guy here to talk about some great sports history. I'm sure you got stories galore. But we're going to sort of center in on a book that you wrote not too long ago. Maybe you could start off by telling folks the title of it and where they can get it.
City of Champions. It's actually still being sold on
Hmm.
Amazon or any bookseller's website. Might be in a few bookstores left too, but it's the story of the 1939 National Championship high school football game. And you might say, wow, there was actually a national championship high school football game. Yeah, well, there was in 1939. And Garfield, which is my alma mater, and that's why I knew about the story because it's passed down from generation to generation still in Garfield, took on Miami High in the Orange Bowl on Christmas night and ended up winning by a field goal with 2 minutes left by one of the most highly recruited high school players in the country at the time, Benny Babula, which
Wow.
was a fantastic football name. And Benny ended up going to Fordham and kind of blew out both knees. So that was the end of his.
Hmm.
There were no James Nicholases or famous knee surgeons at the time. So you blew out a knee, it was pretty much over for your football career. But it was a tremendous story because Miami was a. I mean, they were. I mean, this was in the middle of the Depression, and Miami High School's football team had was probably the uh, best program in the country. I mean, they did the competition in Florida, and you think of now. I mean, Florida is maybe arguably the best state in the country for high school football. At the time, Miami couldn't find competition in Florida, so they had to go out of state. They played teams from Atlanta and Knoxville, Tennessee, and Mobile, Alabama. And they flew their coaches in to do scouting reports. I mean, this is the depression here, but what they were able to do is they were able to bring teams into the Orange Bowl, played a very big crowds, as big crowds as the University of Miami was attracting at the time, and filling the coffers of the athletic department. So it was kind of a man. It was just kind of a franchise almost. And in 1939, because of the rise of polio in in the country, the National Sports Foundation, which was chaired by Grantland Rice and a bunch of sports writers, mostly in New York, uh, devised this idea, the national championship game, for the benefit of the uh, Infantile Paralysis Association, which was FDR's, uh, Franklin Roosevelt's pet charity. He had polio himself.
Mhm.
So this was the first one, first and only one actually. They didn't have another one after this, although they did have a couple of national championships games, or so called, in other places. And Garfield went down there in kind of a upset underdog little team from Garfield, New Jersey that nobody ever heard of beats Miami in the Orange Bowl. But it's more than that. The book is more than football, though there's plenty of football in it. It's packed with football. But it's kind of I wrote it against the backdrop of what was going on in the country and specifically in those two cities, um, between the Depression and World War II. And then afterwards, I do follow these players into World War II, where what they learned on the football field, they applied on the battlefield, and it's kind of all encompassing. I didn't leave any stone unturned with the research. I kind of whatever avenues were there, I followed them out to however they went. So I was pretty pleased with it. I think it's a great look at the period, and at football and high school football at the time, and the single wing and everything else. I even go into the formations. Miami played the short punt formation, by the way, if you're wondering.
Oh, okay. Now, how what an exciting time. For the kids in Miami, it probably wasn't all that big a deal if they've been playing in the Orange Bowl. But Christmas Day, pre-World War II for the United
Yeah.
States anyway, and you're traveling from cold New York City and going south into Florida. It's not like we today, people take vacations all the time. That
Uh,
had to be a pretty rare thing at the time.
well, it was a train ride, of course. They took the train all the way down, and most of the Garfield kids hadn't been like more than 50 miles away from home ever. A couple of them got to New York City, I guess. But the train stopped in Philadelphia, and one of them wanted to know if they were in Florida yet. But they got off the train in Miami and it was another world. There were palm trees. There were things they never saw before. I mean, imagine seeing a palm tree for the first time. It wasn't, you got to think back then there wasn't any, maybe they saw one in a movie somewhere, but I mean,
Mhm.
this was like a foreign place to them. And they were immediately met with, they supplied high school co-eds, one for every guy on the team. And there was a parade from the train station to their hotel, the Alcazar on Biscayne Boulevard, which was
Mhm.
this beautiful, at the time, beautiful palm tree, 4-lane boulevard, fronting Bayfront Park, which was a beautiful park filled with everything, all sorts of flowers and everything else. And they stayed at the Alcatraz, and it was kind of a fantasy world. And many of them said, this was the best experience of their lives. Uh, I was lucky to talk to a couple who were still surviving from then, and got some stories. And I mean, this, although they obviously they went into the war and everything changed, and came out of the war, and everything changed again. But it's funny that most of the guys on both sides, Miami and Garfield, mentioned that they played on those football teams. And especially on the Garfield side, that they were part of a national championship team uh, long ago.
Oh man, I can't even imagine. I can just sit there and think about, I'm from the north. I'm in the Great Lakes region. And I can
Hmm.
remember I was like 9 or 10 the first time I went to Florida, and I can remember seeing the palm trees, and you see them on TV and everything, but
Yeah.
nothing's like really looking at one in person. So I can appreciate what they must have gone through
Yeah, well, the
to.
funny thing was too that Garfield played in woolen uniforms. Miami, of course, had
Oh,
they had different type special jerseys for the heat. I mean, they played in it all the time. So Babula during the game lost 18 pounds during that game
jeez.
of sweat,
Wow.
playing in those hot woolen uniforms. There was a you mentioned you're from the Great Lakes region, but there was a nationwide search for an opponent for Miami. Miami's was probably going to represent the South. They needed somebody to represent the North. So maybe they were going to settle on a team from the New York area anyway. I mean, they were really they actually had set on a team from New York City, at Seward Park, but the rules in New York prohibited teams from playing a certain amount of miles from home and then a certain amount of time after the season ended. And although they tried to get Seward, I mean, they went up to the Governor Lehman and they went to the Mayor LaGuardia trying to get this team Seward Park into the game, and eventually they were unable to do so. And there was Garfield, across the river,
Hmm.
an undefeated team and the best team in the state of New Jersey, and probably a better team than Seward Park anyway. They wanted to get a New York City team in there because they thought it would draw more fans, and there were a lot of New Yorkers down there, still are obviously, and but they weren't unable to do that, and there was Garfield, the next best option.
Now, did they have like state championships back then for the
Oh
states,
yeah,
or was it just okay? I
yeah,
know here in
especially in New Jersey.
Pennsylvania
I mean,
we
New
didn't have them
Jersey
till
was.
recently in Pennsylvania here. That's why I mean like 1980s, you know.
Well, New Jersey was full of good teams. There were maybe six teams that could have gone down there and competed with them. In fact, there was another team from Nutley that went down and played another team from Florida, although it wasn't billed as the national championship. Team from Live Oak in northern Florida, and the Nutley team came out a win as well. And Nutley thought they were a better team than Garfield was, and that he should have been in the Miami game. But that's in one of the chapters. So I cover that pretty extensively. And actually, the next year, Nutley and Garfield, they ended up playing in the first game of the season. They arranged that, and Nutley kind of got its revenge with a win. But Garfield didn't have Babula either. So
Now,
say what you
this
want.
had just from what you're describing, this almost had to be the last age of innocence for many of these kids. They're in high
Oh yeah,
school, and then what 2 years later they're many of them are overseas and fighting the Nazis or the Japanese or whoever they're fighting at the time. Where they're
yeah,
from.
absolutely. Guys on both teams were in the fight, and a couple lost their lives. A couple of heroic stories that I got
Mm,
back on. There was a guy named John Grembowitz who was probably the second best player on the Garfield team, and had an amazing night that night in the Orange Bowl. Was probably the player of the game, especially on defense. He was a normal lineman because of injuries. They moved him back, and then Art Argauer, the coach of the Garfield team, kind of set up his defense so that Grembowitz would be kind of the rover back then. It was kind of like a linebacker who falls back and into coverage, and that kind of fouled up Miami a little bit. And Miami had a guy named Davy Eldridge. In fact, it was billed as the Battle of the Blondes because Babula was the big blonde guy and Eldridge was the speedster who was uh, all season long. He was breaking off big runs for touchdowns. And Grembowitz was kind of the guy back there and always taking them down. And ended up going to William and Mary, playing a little football, coming out of there, and then he wanted to be a pilot in the Air Force, and was killed in a training accident over
mm.
Kansas before he got over there. And I kind of go into detail on that too. So, but there were a bunch of guys. They all went in. I think there was only two guys on both rosters that didn't go into service. Uh, so,
Yeah.
that's how it was. And yeah, there's some good stories during the war years too of what these guys went through. Babula himself was on a PT boat and ended up with two Purple Hearts. Wasn't
Wow.
uncommon.
Yeah, these guys are heroes too. That's even
Absolutely.
makes
I
it
mean,
really interesting.
I look at the book as kind of the story of the greatest generation in the making. We call those guys the greatest generation, and they probably are what they did,
Yeah.
what they sacrificed. But this was the greatest generation in the making. What before they became the greatest generation.
Yeah, they're sort of on the rise at the time, right?
Hmm.
Now, was it, you mentioned, both teams are playing different offenses. This is right at the transitional period, or right before the transition of, the, uh, the wing T coming in, so single
Right.
wings and double wing are
Right. It was the single
evident, but
wing was obviously the formation that most teams were playing. Miami played a short punt formation, which was kind of like a shotgun, like almost like a pistol.
okay.
And you know what the single wing was. It was a direct snap anyway, but Miami had it a little further back. It was more of a conducive to passing than the single wing was.
Now,
Had
did
better
that
protection.
give problems to each team because maybe they weren't familiar with
The
the
interesting thing
strategy
was
of their foe?
they'd exchange game films, and
Oh, okay.
but what happened was that Garfield had some injuries, and Art Argauer, the Garfield coach, kind of outfoxed the Miami coach in what he showed him, and then he came out with kind of a different little look, and the wrinkle was Grembowitz back there, and on the first play of the game, actually, so I mean, the quarterback wasn't actually the quarterback. It was the tailback. That was the guy
Mm,
who ran the offense, a triple threat. He could run, he could pass, he could punt. Babula would punt 60 yarders, which was crazy back in the
mm,
day. But so the tailback kind of ran the offense. But Miami had a guy in its roster named Jason Cozy, and he was their best passer. And sometimes the direct snap would go to him as well. And he got hurt on the first play of the game by Grembowitz. Grembowitz actually tackled him in the first play of the game.
oh, jeez.
Miami, what they would do was they kept Eldridge, their best player, on the sidelines for the first series. They did this all year, so he could get a look at what the defense was doing. And with him out of the game, Cozy was running the offense as the tailback, and he ended up getting hurt on the first play of the game. And then Eldridge ended up throwing, and I it was either three or four interceptions. They outgained Garfield during the game, but Garfield had the turnover advantage, and that's how they went. Miami hadn't given up a rushing touchdown all year.
Jeez.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And Garfield went over on its first drive, but Bula went off tackle and on a power sweep and scored.
That
That
had to
was
be
the
kind of
first.
deflating for the Miami
Yeah, it was
defense.
kind of a message, right? Kind of a
Right.
message. But it was. I mean, the more I dug into this game, the cooler it was, and I was able to kind of almost uncover buried treasure. I would get these nuggets, because I mean, I knew about the game, I knew about Benny Bobula, but I didn't really know the details of the game, and this enabled me to get in there and dig through all the newspaper stories and accounts and just learn a little bit about my hometown and how it was living there during the Depression. Uh, the funny thing was, the one guy I talked that was still alive, Walter Young, who became one of my dearest friends, although he passed away before the book was
Mm,
finished. Uh, Garfield scored the go-ahead touchdown on a naked reverse with Grembowitz actually running the ball. Babula went off the right side, and then he handed off to Grembowitz, came all the way around the other side. And the last guy to have basically have the chance to get him was Eldridge, the fastest guy in the Miami team. And Walter Young, who was one of the ends, had the responsibility of blocking him and taking him out. And when I met Walter, this was 75 years later, we were talking about the play. And Walter said, I've lived with this my entire life, that I thought I might have clipped him, that I should have been called for a flag. And as soon as the play was over, I was actually looking around for the yellow flag, and none was
mm,
thrown. He says it's bothered me, and he was a very religious man. And he said, this has bothered me that maybe we won the game unfairly, right? So I said, well, Walter, there are the game films are on YouTube. And they are.
okay.
And because Argauer, the Garfield coach, was ahead of his time and used game films, which is kind of crazy. But I said we could watch this. We could see if it was a good block or not. So it was the day after Thanksgiving, and went over to his place, and we were watching the entire game. And then he knew. He says, "We're coming. This is it, right? We're coming." I said, "Yeah, this is the play." And you could see it right on the screen on my computer that he actually hit him straight on. Was a good block, and Walter could let go of his conscience that he had made a good block, and they won the game fairly, fair and square. It was a really
Wow.
cool moment, but he was a great guy, and that's the one thing about writing this book. I came across so many great people that I would never met from that generation, and it was probably the best part about writing the book. We got great reviews. We hope to sell more copies than we did, but it's hard. It's just hard to get the book discovered. And So hopefully, it's a little late. I mean, I wrote this thing in 2018, but if you're interested in the history of football, I think you really enjoy it. Everyone who read it or reviewed it, we got some five-star reviews everywhere. Just we just couldn't get the word out across the country enough. But I'm very proud of it, and it's really cool. I put my entire kind of spirit and heart into the thing, and I'm happy the way it turned out.
It sounds like, I mean, first of all, I mean, I assume that he had never seen that game film before too. So
No,
75 years later, he lives with
75.
that, and then he gets to see himself playing as a youngster. That had to be exciting all itself, and then
Yeah.
to relive that play and
Yeah,
find
that
out,
was in black and white, but there was also a game film that I posted on YouTube of the Garfield Passaic game that year. Passaic was that was the only game they lost. They were like I said, they were about six, maybe five or six teams from New Jersey that could have gone down and given Miami a good game. Passaic was one of them, and this game film was in color,
wow.
and I put it on. In fact, I invite anybody to go on and just search for Garfield Passaic 1939. It's on YouTube.
We
It
might
looks
have
like
to
it was shot
research
two
that up
weeks.
and put links on for for folks to check it
Yeah,
out
you
along
should. You
with your
should.
book.
Everybody should go back and look at this. But it looks like the game film was shot like 3 weeks ago. It was just such great color and action. And Babula runs for 193 yards that day. And I sent the film to Ernie Accorsi, who was the GM of the Giants, and before that the Browns. And I said, "Do me a favor, give me a scouting report on Babula." And he sent it back, and he was just raving about the balance he had and the power and everything else. But it really, if you're interested in watching this single, it's a thing of beauty. This single wing is a thing of beauty. It's just choreo. It's maybe the Packers sweep with linemen instead of backs kind of thing. And it's just the way the two pulling guards come out and the way they take care of their blocks and everything is done so precisely. And then Babula gets through the hole and he starts taking people on and he gives people stiff arms and everything else. And it's just beautiful. It was a beautiful thing to watch the way that thing came to life, the single wing.
Yeah, I'll bet. That's it's just an amazing time that you're writing about because I always use World War II as sort of that line of demarcation of the old formations sort of going out and single platoon football on its way out because of the war, and then
Right.
substitution comes in, the wing T and everything else that comes off of that, and so it's a great time, and just what a monumental period of time in world history, where everything changes for everybody across the globe too because of conflict and
Yeah.
folks traveling around the world to
Well,
fight for
the
freedom.
thing too was that Garfield was an immigrant town. It was mostly East Europeans and Italians for the most part who came to work in the woolen mills that where there was Forsman Woolen in Garfield, and across the river in Passaic there were a Botany and a couple of other woolen mills, Gira mills, blah blah blah. So the immigrants provided the muscle for the textile mills, and these were their sons. This was kind of second generation Americans, and World War II is the start of World War II is the start of the football season, September 1939, and these immigrants who had worked in the mills, I mean, they had left their families behind, their mothers and fathers behind in the old country, and probably never saw them again. But now you've got Germany invading Poland, and uh, and it was kind of like, look, we're here, and they raised their kids to be Americans, and while they still embrace their culture. And look, I'm Polish. I go back there too.
Mm.
My dad grew up. He would have been in this class. He dropped out of school, but he would have been in the same class at Garfield, the class of 1940. And so I know all the traditions and the customs. But these kids were raised to be Americans, and that's why they kind of took to it when World War II hit and Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. I mean, there was a race to the to sign up and enlist.
Enlisting, yeah, wow.
Mhm.
Yeah, the guys are good. very brave generation. I think you're right, and they deserved it for each
Yeah.
generation to have it they have. So,
Yeah.
Hank, why
And
don't you tell
football was
us?
such a perfect sport for these guys. They love to get in there and mix it up and the way it was played back then, it was, in the trenches and everything else. This was kind of the perfect way.
Yeah, very good. Hank, why don't you take the opportunity? Let's give the title of the book again and where folks can get a
Okay.
copy.
Sure. City of Champions is the name of the book, and it's on Amazon is the easiest way to get it, although it's probably still available on Barnes and Noble and some of the other booksellers like Thrift Books and everything. But I do know it's in stock on Amazon, and it might still be in a couple of bookstores. You can find out. Again, it was 2018 when I wrote it, so but they're still out there, and it got such a great review in Library Journal that a lot of the libraries across the country picked it up, so it could still be in a lot of libraries if you want to check it out that way.
Yeah, definitely many avenues to get it. Well, Hank, you have a great website I was checking out. I mean, folks, I invite you to do it too. It's hankgola.com,
Yeah,
HankGola. And it has a lot about some of your other work and your books and Ryder
yeah.
Cup book that's recently out. That's got to be an exciting one.
Yeah, it is. On the website, actually, if you do get the book and start reading it, I have supplementary material for each chapter or for most of the chapters. So that if you're reading a chapter, you go to the website, and then I'll put up some things that I didn't get into the book that are pertinent. I've got some film, for instance, the chapter I do on infantile paralysis. I have some information on polio and a guy named Fred Snipe, who lived out his life in an iron lung. And
Mm.
again, football related because he was a Notre Dame alum, and then he was stricken with polio after that. And he would go to all the Notre Dame games, and they would set up the iron lung in the end zone of Notre Dame Stadium. And when they brought it in, he got a bigger hand ovation than the Notre Dame team got running onto the field. So Fred Snight there, but it's kind of stuff like that where I couldn't really get it into the book, but I thought it was interesting enough to put out there for anyone who's interested for a little more. But Ryder Cup Rivals is out. Obviously, this is Ryder Cup week. I'll be out there,
Mhm.
and it's gotten some really good reviews too. Sports Illustrated actually did a review and said it was the one book to read before the Ryder Cup. I picked out 13, not necessarily the best, but the most impactful Ryder Cups, the ones that can either change the course of the competition or stood out as most memorable. And I do 13 chapters with 13 different Ryder Cups, and I kind of treat them as short stories. So if you're into golf and into the Ryder Cup, I recommend that one too.
Wow, definitely sounds like some good reads to get here real quick and get your football and Ryder Cup seasons on here with some good
Yeah,
writing by a veteran journalist and author.
I
Hank, we
was the
really
guy. I actually, if you're a golf fan, you remember when Phil Mickelson kind of threw Tom Watson under the bus in
yeah.
2014 at Glen Eagles. I was the guy who asked the question, who opened up that whole can of worms.
Oh,
So
you're the rabble rouser,
yeah, I have a
huh?
little. I have a very small, but not necessarily inconsequential part in Ryder Cup history.
Well, Hank, we really appreciate you coming on here and sharing information about your books and City of Champions. I'll have links, folks, if you're driving, couldn't write it down when Hank was describing it. We'll have links to get you to his book and to his website. You can check out his stuff and get a copy.
Yeah.
And
And if
Hank, we
you're in the New York, New Jersey area, I will be appearing at the Morristown Festival of Books, talking about Ryder Cup rivals, but I might have some City of Champions copies of City of Champions, and I'll be signing books afterwards. So if you're around, come on over. It's a great book fair. A lot of prominent writers or authors are there, so make a day out of it. But
yeah.
come on over, say hi, and tell me you saw me on the podcast.
All right. Good stuff, Hank. We appreciate you coming on and good luck with the book sales.
Thank you, Darren. I really enjoyed the session. Take care.
That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.